The once pristine, cool Pacific Ocean water surrounding the gorgeous Alaskan landscape was ruined in an instant. The water was now covered in a thick layer of slick, iridescent goo that slowly seeped out of the holds of a stranded oil tanker. The coastline was littered with dead animal carcasses and coated in heavy clumps of black sludge. The local community was beside themselves. Just yesterday, their lives and home were normal, and now it would never be the same again. Welcome to Shipwreck Sunday. My name is Eleanor. Just a quick disclaimer for a younger audience before we dive in. This story may be disturbing to some, so viewer discretion is advised. Okay everyone, let's get into it. First of all, shout out to Leopard1 on YouTube for correctly guessing what we changed on our channel's layout and winning the shoutout contest. Cheers, friend! And secondly, if you didn't know, I'm pretty young, so I was not alive in 1989 when the oil spill happened. That being said, I also didn't know that it's got some controversy about it and that causes a lot of mixed feelings and strong emotions. However, before the oil spill, she had a short career that many don't even think about. Before we get into Exxon Valdez, we need to set the scene a little bit. Her owner, Exxon, is now current-day ExxonMobil Corporation after the 1999 merger of the two oil and gasoline companies, Exxon and Mobil. This multinational corporation is the largest direct descendant of Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller's oil company that operated from 1870 until 1911 and solidified the Rockefeller name in history. ExxonMobil, oftentimes shortened to just Exxon, is the largest United States-based oil and gas-producing company, and it is also the 8th largest company in the world by revenue and the 3rd largest in the U.S. This means they have a lot of oil tankers, and Exxon Valdez was just one of them. The ship was ordered by Exxon on August 1, 1984, with National Steel and Shipbuilding Company of San Diego, California being awarded the contract. The ship would be laid down on July 24, 1985, being built over the rest of 1985 and most of 1986, being launched on October 14, 1986. She was delivered to Exxon on December 16, 1986, but before we get any further into Exxon Valdez's story, let's take a look at her specs. Exxon Valdez is a ship that goes through many names, a refit, and a few different owners after the oil crisis, but before that she was built as a VLCC oil tanker. According to the American Bureau of Shipping, or ABS, she was graded as follows. A1, which according to documents from ABS is a classification symbol that indicates compliance with the hull requirements of the ABS rules for oil carriers. An ore carrier, meaning she could transport both oil and ore. AMS certified, which means she passed the Advanced Marine Surveys to qualify for marine insurance. ACCU, which stands for Australian Carbon Credit Units, and this signifies emissions reduction. And GRAB 25, which was the grade for hold reinforcement requirements back then. Her maritime call sign was 3EPL6, her IMO number was 8414520, and her MMSI number or Marine Mobile Service Identity number was 356270000. Exxon Valdez was a long, wide cargo ship that sat much closer to the water than your standard ocean liner or cruise ship. Her hull was blue with a white superstructure in the aft section of the ship where the bridge was. Her tonnage was 214,861 deadweight tons, which is a measure of how much weight a ship can carry, and her displacement was 240,291 long tons. She was 987 feet long, had a beam of 166 feet wide, a draft of 64.5 feet tall, and a depth of 88 feet deep. She was capable of carrying 1.48 million barrels or 235,000 cubic meters of crude oil, serviced by a crew of 21. Her hull was a single hull type, and she was able to reach average service speeds of 16.25 knots. To do this, she was powered by an 8-cylinder reversible slow-speed Sulzer Marine diesel engine graded for 31,650 horsepower at 79 revolutions per minute. That's a pretty powerful engine. and you're in the middle of a powerful story. If you're enjoying this video, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know down in the comments section below. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, the oil spill. At the time of the oil spill, Exxon Valdez was a relatively new vessel, only having served just under 3 years for Exxon when disaster would strike. From the little I can find about her career before the accident, it was unnoteworthy and routine as you could possibly hope for. However, one fateful day would mar her legacy forever. In 1989, when the oil spill occurred, Exxon Valdez was contracted to transport crude oil from the Alyeska Consortium's pipeline terminal located in Valdez, Alaska, hence her name, down to the lower 48 states in America. She was doing just that in March of 1989, docking at the Valdez Marine Terminal at 11:30 p.m. on March 22, 1989 in Prince William Sound. Here, crude oil was loaded onto the ship, and it was completed by the following evening on the 23rd, with the ship now carrying 53,094,510 U.S. gallons of crude oil. Captained by Joseph Hazelwood, the ship left the terminal at 9:12 p.m., clearing the dock by 9:21 p.m. 4 minutes later at 9:24 p.m., Captain Hazelwood headed to his cabin, with harbor pilot William Murphy and third mate Gregory Cousins taking charge, being accompanied by a single tugboat for passage through the Valdez Narrows, a stretch of water about 7 miles long. After getting through the Valdez Narrows at 11:24 p.m., the pilot left the bridge and the captain was called back out. Third mate Cousins helped pilot Murphy leave the ship, leaving Captain Hazelwood alone as the only officer on the bridge. At 11:25 p.m., Exxon Valdez reported the pilot's departure officially, and Cousins went on to advise traffic control of this and then decided he'd deviate slightly from the predetermined traffic lane to avoid small icebergs. This is common in this area because the Columbia Glacier forms icebergs nearby. The ship was placed on a course due south and placed on autopilot. At 11:47 p.m., the ship wandered outside of the traffic lane's east boundary. Here's where it gets really easy to get on third mate Cousins and Captain Hazelwood's cases, and when rumors and conspiracies start to fly wildly about them. I'm going to give you as honest and unbiased a take on this as I can, and you feel free to form your own opinion on the matter. Just please be reminded to challenge the argument and not the person in the comments section. Sound good? Alright, let's keep moving. Cousins had been working for 6 hours and was scheduled to rouse second mate Lloyd LeCain Jr. to relieve him. However, Cousins felt empathy for the second mate since he'd worked such long hours previously, and Cousins wanted to let him sleep, so he stayed on duty. We've seen instances of this before, like with the story of SS Atlantic, and both of these cases turned out oddly similar in a way. Cousins was also the only officer on the bridge for the majority of the night, which was in direct violation of company policy. At about midnight on March 24, 1989, he began to maneuver the ship into the traffic lanes. Simultaneously, the lookout reported that the Bligh Reef light appeared far off the starboard bow at 45 degrees. This was a problem since the light should have been on their port side, meaning they were way off course. Immediately, Cousins ordered a course change since the ship was now in danger. Cousins phoned Captain Hazelwood, but before the captain could hang up the phone and get to the bridge, disaster struck. At 12:04 a.m., the ship experienced intense, bumpy vibrations and 6 sharp jolts as she grounded on Bligh Reef. Just for reference, remember SS Atlantic? Well, the second mate had veered off course approaching the ever-dangerous Halifax Harbor in 1870, looking for the light of Sambro Lighthouse, which they did not spot. While looking for the light from the lighthouse, they grounded on Golden Rule Rock, dooming the ship. History tends to repeat itself, and 119 years later, here was Exxon Valdez in an eerily similar predicament. Exxon Valdez was swept up by her own momentum, carrying her up onto the reef, and she was perched on the middle of her keel on a pinnacle of rocks. 8 out of her 11 cargo holds were punctured, and within 3 hours and 15 minutes, 5.8 million gallons of crude oil would seep out into Prince William Sound. The crew would desperately try to dislodge the ship under her own power for 30 minutes before reporting the incident to the Coast Guard. For more than 45 minutes after the grounding, Captain Hazelwood continued to try to dislodge the ship despite First Mate James Kunkel informing him the ship was not structurally sound without sitting on the reef. In total, 10.8 million gallons of her 53.1 million gallons of crude oil spilled out into the sea, becoming the second largest oil spill in American history, and completely collapsing populations of local marine species, particularly herring, clams, and seals, though they did recover eventually. A few of the short and long-term impacts were the loss of recreational sports and fisheries, and reduced tourism, as well as depleting the stocks of salmon and herring living near Cordova, Alaska. Not only this, but in 2010, CNN reported on studies that found many oil spill cleanup workers that worked cleaning up the Exxon Valdez oil spill had become sick, warning those cleaning up after the Deepwater Horizon spill to be cautious. An Anchorage, Alaska lawyer named Dennis Mestas continued looking into this, finding it to be true for 6,722 of 11,000 worker files he could get his hands on, though of course Exxon denied these findings. Subsequently, much of the same sicknesses were reported by those that helped after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Hell, even the Unabomber, also known as the serial killer Ted Kaczynski, assassinated Burson Marsteller executive Thomas J. Moser, accusing him of having, quote, helped Exxon clean up its public image after the Exxon Valdez incident. There are three main factors that contributed to this oil spill, and they are, number one, Exxon Shipping Company did not supervise the ship's captain and provide a sufficient rested crew for Exxon Valdez. This practice was alarmingly discovered across the board for the industry, prompting reform. Number two, the third mate did not properly maneuver the vessel, possibly because of his excessive workload or being exhausted. And three, Exxon Shipping Company did not maintain the Raytheon Collision Avoidance System radar, which could have told the third mate of an impending collision had it been functional. It was widely reported that Captain Hazelwood was drinking excessively that night and was not at the ship's controls that night. Exxon then used him as a scapegoat, and he was charged with criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and piloting a vessel while intoxicated in a 1990 trial, but was luckily cleared of these charges, though a misdemeanor charge of negligent discharge of oil would stick despite the fact that 21 witnesses testified that he did not appear to be under the influence of alcohol around the time of the incident. He would offer an apology in 2009 to the people of Alaska, disputing his blame for the disaster, stating, quote, the true story is out there for anybody who wants to look at the facts, but that's not the sexy story and that's not the easy story. He also went on to say that he always believed Alaskans gave him a fair shake. The cleanup was extensive, and we aren't going to go into all of the details of it since we are here for Exxon Valdez herself, but we will do the Cliff Notes version of it. Chemical dispersant made with a solvent and surfactant mixture was applied to the slick in the very beginning, but the safety regarding these chemicals is highly debated, especially since it contained 2-butadiethanol, which is a respiratory irritant and can be acutely toxic, but it's unclear its impacts on the wildlife or the humans working on the cleanup. Next, they tried to mechanically clean up the oil spill using booms and skimmers, but the skimmers weren't available during the first 24 hours when they could be incredibly effective. Not only this, the equipment kept getting clogged up by kelp and thick oil. The cleanup, despite being pretty diligent so far, only cleared up about 10% of the oil spilled. After this, high-pressure hot water was used to hose off the rocky coves where oil had collected. Unfortunately, it destroyed microbial populations in these areas as well, which aids in the breaking down of oil. This meant that in the short term, at least 100,000 to 250,000 seabirds were killed, at least 2,800 sea otters, around 12 river otters, 300 harbor seals, 22 orcas, and 247 bald eagles, the national bird of the United States. Not only this, but an unknown but impactful number of herring and salmon perished. The long-term effects were and possibly still are affecting the area, with reports of recovery seeming decently positive, though not 100% positive, in 2014. The recovery in Prince William Sound is slow and steady. The love of our patrons can be felt immediately. This episode couldn't be possible without our lovely patrons. Thank you all so much. If you'd like to support the channel and future episodes, go to patreon.com/shipwrecksunday to join. Okay, let's take a look at the aftermath. Of course, with an oil spill like this, rightfully so, there's going to be some litigation. Surprisingly, a lot of these lawsuits were Exxon lashing out. first at the state of Alaska in October of 1989, claiming that the state had hindered Exxon's usage of dispersant chemicals until 2 days after the spill. The state clapped back, stating there was a long-standing agreement between them and Exxon to use these chemicals in the case of an oil spill, and that Exxon didn't need permission. The fact of the matter was that Exxon just didn't have the amount of chemicals they needed to deal with Exxon Valdez. The following October in 1990, Exxon lashed out again, this time at the Coast Guard, asking for reimbursement for cleanup costs and damages awarded to plaintiffs in any lawsuits filed by the federal government or state of Alaska against Exxon. Exxon was even bold enough to state that the Coast Guard was, quote, wholly or partially responsible for the oil spill, all because they'd licensed the crew of Exxon Valdez. They also blamed the Coast Guard for the delayed usage of dispersant chemicals. In 1991, they quickly and quietly settled with the Seattle Seven, a group of seafood producers because of the effect on the Alaskan seafood industry. They'd win $63.75 million, but they'd have to repay almost all of any punitive damages that were awarded in other civil proceedings. Punitive damages in layman's terms are the "you suck" damages given on top of penalties. Check out the lovely lawyer Emily D. Baker here on YouTube if you are curious as to how punitive damages work. There would be lawsuit after lawsuit, and Exxon would end up paying $507.5 million in punitive damages alone, including lawsuit costs and interest, and this was distributed to thousands of plaintiffs in 2009. We know what happened to Exxon and the basics of the litigation and cleanup, but what happened to Exxon Valdez? Exxon Valdez was sent off for repairs and a refit, being renamed Exxon Mediterranean, then Sea River Mediterranean, all in the early 1990s. After this, Exxon transferred its shipping business to a new subsidiary, River Maritime Inc. Her name was then shortened to SR Mediterranean, then to just Mediterranean in 2005. Exxon did briefly try to reinstate her as part of the North American fleet, but it was prohibited by law from ever returning to Prince William Sound in Alaska. Despite the fact that her sister ship of the same design, Exxon Long Beach, was never removed from that route. SR Mediterranean, as she was known at the time, served in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, being removed from service in 2002. In 2005, as Mediterranean, she was operating under the Marshall Islands Flag of Convenience, which is a business practice whereby a ship's owners register a merchant ship in a ship register of a country other than that of the ship's owners, and the ship then flies the ensign of that country. A great example of this is RMS Queen Mary II, flying the ensign of Bermuda. Shortly after this, the European Union began banning single-hull designs like that of Exxon Valdez from their ports. And in early 2008, Sea River Maritime, another Exxon subsidiary, sold Mediterranean to the Hong Kong-based shipping company Hong Kong Bloom Shipping Limited. They'd rename her to Dongfeng Ocean, with the ship being registered in Panama. In 2008, she was refitted and changed to an ore carrier instead of an oil tanker. Just when we thought her troubled past was behind her, we find that Dongfeng Ocean got herself in trouble. On November 29, 2010, she collided with the Malta-flagged cargo vessel MV Ollie in the South China Sea. Both ships were severely damaged and had to be towed. MV Ollie was towed to Weihai, and Dongfeng Ocean was towed to Longyan Port in Shandong, China. In March of 2012, the entire world had had enough of her, and Dongfeng Ocean was purchased by Global Marketing Systems Incorporated for scrap for around $16 million. Under her own power, she set sail for the shipbreakers in Singapore, then being transferred to another scrap merchant, Priya Blue Industries, in Alang, India. At some point during this journey, she was renamed Oriental Nicety. Before she was beached, it's rumored that someone, we don't know who, tried to stop it, claiming her to be in breach of Basel Convention. The Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movements of Hazardous Wastes and Their Disposal, or simply put, the Basel Convention, is an international treaty that was designed to reduce the movements of hazardous waste between nations and prevent the transfer of hazardous waste from developed to less developed nations. On July 30, 2012, the Supreme Court of India granted permission for the beaching of Oriental Nicety at Gujarati coast to be scrapped. She was beached on August 2, 2012 at Alang and scrapped. Despite the fact the ship no longer exists, her impact on our culture and the environment is everlasting, with the wounds from the Exxon Valdez oil spill healing slowly. Oil spills are horrific and can completely destroy entire ecosystems, and we are lucky that this oil spill wasn't worse than it was. Unfortunately for Exxon Valdez, her name is synonymous only with the oil spill she was responsible for. If you liked that story and wanted to hear something similar, check out our cargo ships playlist in the cards. Stay tuned next week for the story of the Mataafa storm in 1905, a Great Lakes storm that grounded, stranded, and sank several ships, and was suggested by one of our lovely viewers. Thank you for tuning into Shipwreck Sunday, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.